What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Dwayne, and I got a question for you. Have you ever had a discussion with your spouse or significant other, and you realized that the discussion went from just a discussion to an argument, and by the end of that argument, you were like, they weren't listening? I've been there. Anyway, I got some thoughts on that. Let's hop on the bike and let's talk about it. Stay in a little bit. What's up, YouTube? We're out here on the road, finally back on the bike, where I like to be. So I left you with the question, and I wanted to talk about that question. I know we all have heard many times, that a few different things you can do to make sure that you are actively listening, make eye contact and lean in and make sure you're focused on them and them alone, and make sure that you're giving them your undivided attention. And those things are great. But I think that to really show somebody you're listening, it requires a little bit more. And so here's my thought. So there is a difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. And most of the time, people are just listening to respond. That's it. They're just listening to respond. I probably should go ahead and close this down. And what happens is one person talks and they're listening, but they're not really listening to understand. They're listening to respond. So as soon as one person speaks, the other person starts talking. But what they say next is the most important thing, and we tend to get it wrong most of the time. So instead of you responding in a way that says, I am only thinking about what my perspective is, how about we respond in a way that says, I'm thinking about what your perspective is. So what does that mean? So listening to understand. I'm going to listen to understand what you have to say by doing one simple thing, and that one simple thing is making sure that my response has something to do with your statements that you just made. Nobody ever has a response that has something to do with the statements that the other person made when they're in a pretty heated discussion. Because everybody wants their opinion to be heard, and nobody really wants to take time for the other person's opinion. So here's the trick to that. The very next thing you say after you listen to your significant other or spouse or friend or whoever it is that you're listening to, the very next thing that you say to them should have something to do, and I'm stopping just for this, should have something to do with what they just said. That gives them the response that says, I am listening. Not only am I listening, but I care about what you said. People say, well, I was listening, but did you really care about what they said? And the only way you can show that is to make sure that your response has something to do with what they just said. And so we never do that. But let me tell you what that does for you. What it does is it breaks down their defensive wall. And so what we need to do is take the time to ask a question that pertains to the other person's statements so that they don't put their wall up immediately. Because as soon as they put their wall up because they think you're not listening, or they think that you don't care about what they said, that's it. They're no longer listening to you either. And we get nowhere. And that's what happens when a discussion tends to turn into an argument. Because nobody is listening to understand. They're just listening to respond. It's crazy, folks. Little things. I dare you to try this with somebody in your life. I dare you to not respond with a statement that has something to do with your own opinion, but that has something to do with what they just said. See how they respond afterwards when it's your turn to talk about your perspective. You're probably going to find that they're going to have a better chance of listening to what you got to say than they would have if you would have not engaged in what they said first. I have to warn you, folks, that's going to require a little bit of maturity and a little bit of putting your pride aside. It doesn't work without those two things. And so this was my thought for today. Listening to understand versus listening to respond. And I hope you got something out of that. Well, folks, that's all I have for you for today. So until next time, ride in peace, live on purpose, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.